Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope by the grace of Almighty Allah, you all will be fine. This is your lecture number 3 of Business Process Engineering, and we were discussing business process management. In our previous lecture, within the sphere of business process management, first we defined business process management and then we deep dive into the details of business process management and elicit the key components of business process management. We also explored the business process management life cycle. We listed major processes involved in business process management life cycle, that are strategize, plan, monitor, and adjust. We had thorough discussion on the first process of business process management, that is strategize. We talked about why does a company need a well-defined strategy, a well-formulated strategy. We explored the basic tasks in strategic planning process. We also highlighted the sources of gap between formulating a strategy and actually executing the strategy. So that was a recap of our previous lecture. Let's have a look on the design of our today's lecture. In today's lecture, we will continue with the remaining concepts of business process management. We will examine the other processes of business process management life cycle that are plan, monitor, attend, adjust. So let's start. Business process management processes. We are done with strategize phase. Now time for process number 2, that is plan. Planning is basically about how do we get there. When operational managers know and understand the what phase. What phase means goals and objectives of your organization. They will be able to come up with the how phase of your organization. Means detailed operational and financial plans of your organization. Operational and financial plans answer two questions. Number one is what tactics and initiatives will be pursued to meet the performance targets established by the strategic plan. And number two is what are the expected financial results of executing the tactics. Let's explore both one by one. An operational plan translates an organization's strategic objectives and goals into a set of well-defined tactics and initiatives, resource requirements, and expected results for some future time period, usually but not always a year. In essence, an operational plan is like a project plan that is designed to ensure that an organization's strategy is realized. Most operational plans encompass a portfolio of tactics and initiatives. The key to successful operational planning is integration. Strategy derives tactics and tactics derives results. Basically, the tactics and initiatives defined in an operational plan needs to be directly linked to key objectives and targets in the strategic plan. If there is no linkage between an individual tactic and one or more strategic objectives or targets, management should question whether the tactic and its associated initiatives are really needed at all. Operational planning can either tactic-centric or budget-centric. In tactic-centric plan, tactics are established to meet the objectives and targets established in the strategic plan. Conversely, In a budget-centric plan, a financial plan or budget is established that sums to the targeted financial values. Best practice organizations use tactic-centric operational plan. This means that they begin the operational planning process by defining the alternative tactics and initiatives that can be used to reach a particular target. For example, if a business is targeting a 10% growth in profit margin, the business will first determine whether it plans to increase the margin by increasing revenues, by reducing expenses, or by using some combination of both. If it focuses on revenues, then the question will become whether it plans to enter new markets or increase sales in existing markets, enhance existing products or introduce new products, or apply some combination of these. The alternate scenarios and associated initiatives have to be weighed in terms of their overall risk, resource requirement, and financial viability. Now, financial planning and budgeting. In most organizations, resources tend to be scarce. If they were not, organizations could simply throw people and money at their opportunities and problems and overwhelm the competition. Given the scarcity of resources, an organization needs to put its money and people where its strategies and linked tactics are. An organization's strategic objectives and key metrics should serve as top-down drivers for the allocation of an organization's tangible and intangible assets. While continuing, operations clearly need support. Key resources should be assigned to the most important strategic programs and priorities. Most organizations use their budget and compensation programs to allocate resources. By implication, both of these need to be carefully aligned with the organization's strategic objectives and tactics in order to achieve strategic success. The best way for an organization to achieve this alignment is to base its financial plan on its operational plan, or more directly to allocate and budget its resources against specific tactics and initiatives. For example, if one of the tactics is to develop a new sales channel, budgeted revenues and costs needed to be assigned to the channel rather than simply having costs assigned to particular functional unit such as marketing and research and development. Without this type of tactical resource planning, there is no way to measure the success of those tactics and hence the strategy. This type of linkage helps organizations avoid the problem of random budget cuts that inadvertently affect associated strategies. Tactic-based budgeting ensures that the link between particular budget line items and particular tactics or initiative is well established and well known. The financial planning and budgeting process has a logical structure that typically starts with those tactics that generate some form of revenue or income. In organizations that sell goods or services, the ability to generate revenue is based on either the ability to directly produce goods and services or acquire the right amount of goods and services to sell. After a revenue figure has been established, the associated cost of delivering that level of revenue can be generated. Quite often, this entails input from several departments or tactics. This means the process has to be collaborative and that dependencies between functions needed to be clearly communicated and understood. In addition to the collaborative input, the organization also needs to add various overhead costs as well as the cost of capital required. This information, once consolidated, shows the cost by tactic as well as the cash and funding requirements to put the plan into operation. That was plan. Now, third process is monitor, that encapsulates how are we doing. When the operational and financial plans are underway, it is imperative that the performance of the organization be monitored. A comprehensive framework for monitoring performance should address two key issues. Number one, what to monitor, and number two, how to monitor. Because it is impossible to look at everything, an organization needs to focus on monitoring specific issues. After the organization has identified the indicators or measures to look at, it needs to develop a strategy for monitoring those factors and responding effectively. Now, what to monitor is usually defined by the critical success factors and the goals or targets established in the strategic planning process. For example, if an instrument manufacturer has a specified strategic objective of increasing the overall profit margin of its current product lines by 5% annually over the next few years, then the organization needs to monitor the profit margin throughout the year to see whether it is trending towards the targeted annual rate of 5%. In the same vein, if this company plans to introduce a new product every quarter for the next 2 years, the organization needs to track new product introduction over the designated time period. Now, how to monitor? Most of the companies use what is known as diagnostic control system to monitor organizational performance and correct deviations from present performance standards. This is true even for those organizations that do not have formal business process management processes or systems. A diagnostic control system is a cybernetic system, meaning that it has inputs, a process for transforming the inputs into outputs, a standard or benchmark against which to compare the outputs, and a feedback channel to allow information on variances between the outputs and the standard to be communicated and acted upon. Virtually any information system can be used as diagnostic control system if it is possible to, number one, set a goal in advance, number two, measure outputs, number three, compute or calculate absolute or relative performance variance, number four, use the variance information as feedback to alter inputs or processes or both to bring performance back in line with present goals and standards. Now the fourth process is act and adjust, that guides us what do we need to do differently. Whether a company is interested in growing its business or simply improving its operations, virtually all strategies depend on new projects, creating new products, entering new markets, acquiring new customers or businesses, or streamlining some processes. Most companies approach these new projects with a spirit of optimism rather than objectivity, ignoring the fact that most new projects and ventures fail. What is the chance of failure? Obviously, it depends on the type of project. According to statistics, Hollywood movies have around a 60% chance of failure. The same is true for mergers and acquisitions. IT projects fail at the rate of 70%. For new food products, the failure rate is 80%. For new pharmaceutical products, it is even higher than 90%. Overall, the rate of failure for most new projects or ventures runs between 60% and 80%. A project can fail in a number of different ways, ranging from considering too few options or scenarios, failing to anticipate a competitor's moves, ignoring chances in the economic or social environment, inaccurately forecasting demand, or understanding the investment required to succeed. Just to name a few of the possibilities. This is why it is critical for a company to continually monitor its results, analyze what has happened, determine why it has happened, and adjust its actions accordingly. If you remember Hera's closed-loop marketing system, the case study which we discussed in our regular class before starting business process management. In the model, the loop begins by defining quantifiable objectives of a marketing campaign. Our test procedures in the form of expected values are outcomes for customers who are in the experimental test group versus those in the control groups. Next, the campaign or test is executed. The campaign is designed to provide the right offer and message at the right time. The selection of particular customers and the treatments they receive are based on their prior experiences with Hera's. Then each customer's response to the campaign is tracked. Not only are response rates measured, but other metrics are as well, such as revenues generated by the incentives and whether the incentives induced a positive change in the behavior, for example, increase frequency of visits, profitability of the visit, or cross-play among the various casinos. Then the effectiveness of campaign is evaluated by determining the net value of the campaign and its profitability relative to the other campaign. Hera's learned which incentives have the most effective influence on customers' behavior or provide the best profitability improvement. This knowledge is used to continually refine its marketing approaches. Over the years, Hera's has run literally thousands of these tests. Although all 5 steps are critical, it is the fact that Hera's is continually analyzing and adjusting its strategies to produce optimal results that sets it apart from its competitors. So that was our today's lecture. Let's wrap up what we have discussed today. We opened our discussion with the second process of business process management, that is plan. We discussed the goal of operational planning. We also explored what is tactic-centric planning and budget-centric planning. We also explored the primary goal of financial planning. After completing plan process, we talked about the critical questions that our monitoring framework answers. We also explored the key elements of a diagnostic control system. In our fourth process, we figured out why 60 to 80% of all new projects fail. Lastly, we also discussed Hera's closed loop model. So that was all. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.